Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about the customizations reports that are sent out of SnapShot. So what I've done is I've rerun the reports and only selected the customizations, and I've selected everything. And so this is what we get. As I mentioned in the previous video, you only get what you select, so there are no administration or business management or security folders, just customizations. So as you can see, there's some extra folders here. We have business rules, form detail, and view detail, along with the other data from the main report. So let's start off with just the Excel files here up front. So the main one that it creates is called metadata, and metadata is exactly what you would think it would be. So in this file, we have entities, fields, option sets, relationships, entity maps, and attribute maps. So this is just your standard metadata that you can probably get with any of the metadata documentation tools. I may have additional stuff that's in here that other people don't, but that's just hit or miss, I guess. So anyway, so if you just look through here, here's everything that you can think you need. Option sets are both global and local. So basically global option sets in addition to the option sets that are per entity. Relationships between the different entities, the mapping of fields between entities using relationships. So this is how you copy data from one entity to the other. And then finally attribute maps, which is the actual, just kind of what I mentioned. So this is the linking of the actual entities between and what fields we link on, and then this is the actual map where you have a source and a target. So between the two of them, this is what actually copies over from one to the other. So this is what's in the metadata report. So if we look at the user interface file, this is anything that is related to, well, the user interface. So we have forms, views, web resources, JavaScript library usage, JavaScript function reference, ribbon commands, system charts, user charts, solutions, publishers, and themes. So let's go through these real quickly. So these are all the forms, and they're sorted by entity. So you have the entity name, the form name, the type, description, the order if it's a fallback, etc. So pretty much anything you need to know about the forms. Views are the same. Here's a list of web resources. So you have the display name, the actual name, the format, and then the number of usages. And that was the usages is a new feature for version 5, and there's actually a check mark that you have to select to get it to count. So how you use this is to find out where we're actually using these things. So like for instance, the sparkle stuff doesn't seem to be used, but then this security session JavaScript from Click Dimensions is used 26 times. And again, this is use as documented by the system within Dynamics. So this will be the same as highlighting something in the solution or in the customization of the default solution and selecting show dependencies. This is exactly the same thing here. So here is a list of all the JavaScript resources and where they're used. The function references themselves, so you have pretty much the entity, the form, the field it may be used on, if it's an on change, is it an on load, on change, on save, or a button click. So this is new to version 5. So I actually pull out the ribbon commands, we'll show in just a second, and anytime that I find a reference on a ribbon command, I also add it to this JavaScript reference. And that way it allows us to see where exactly these things are being used. Okay, so that was kind of a requirement I had for a job I was working on. And then here are the ribbon commands. So what we have here is, and a ribbon command is anything that you've customized within the ribbon or that anybody's customized. So you have the entity, the function, the library, the command ID, the name of the enable rules, the name of the disable rules, parameters. I think I got a typo right here called disable. I will fix that in a new version. And then here's the actual command definition. So I just put this in here, but This is basically what I parsed out and used to create all of these other things. Okay, so I go ahead and put the raw format in there in case you needed to see what it actually looked like. Here's a list of system charts with the various pieces of information, including the data description as well as the presentation, which is how it shows up. So that's semi-useful to people. Charts users created, list of solutions that are installed within the system, publishers, and then finally themes. And what I try to do here is I have the color that you see is set as the background for the actual color there. So these are just the themes that have been created within the system. So again, if you don't use themes, yeah, not a big deal. So anyway, so again, this is anything that shows up on the user interface, and so this kind of helps you keep control of all of that stuff. Business processes. Let's look at that real quick. So I consider business process anything that happens behind the scenes. So that could be plugins, it could be custom workflow activities, which is a type of plugin, or it could be processes, which are workflows, flows, BPS, etc. So here are all the plugin assemblies that are loaded inside of my system. Here are all the steps. Here are any custom workflow activities that are loaded, and then here's a list of all the workflows, etc. Okay. And then the final thing over here is the sitemap, and as I mentioned earlier, it's just going to be a graphical or textual representation of it. So I just try to break it out by area, sub-area, and area, group, and sub-area. So it just this is how it's going to show up. And again, this is the main sitemap of after all of the solutions have been loaded. Okay, so let's go look at the folders here. So let's look at form detail first, since it's kind of interesting. So what you have here is a list of all of the entities that you have within the system that have forms. And then, like, here is my main form, and the way that I try to do this is I have the entity followed by the name of the form, and then parentheses the type. So it's either going to be a main, a quick view form, a quick create form, etc. So if I look at the main form here, this is the one that I use every day. What I'm going to find is pretty much how the form is laid out. So this is kind of my first iteration at documenting this stuff. I have lots I would like to add to this. It's just kind of complicated because there's a lot to it, and it just takes time and effort to do it. So what you see on the left-hand side is pretty much the table of contents here. So I've got it broken down into properties for the form itself. So just some form properties you see on the form properties dialog box, any JavaScript libraries that are associated with it, and then what events are on load or on save on the form itself. Here's information on the header. So what components it is, and the way I have it is I have components. So these are could be fields or control. Here is the display name followed by the actual name of the field itself. If I go down to the summary, so now we're into the main form. So this is a summary tab, information on the summary. If it has columns, how many columns? They all have columns, but how is the columns distributed? Then I get into section, and then the components within the section, and then here's the address, etc., etc. So again, basically just information about that. Here's a notes control. There's no label, as you can see. And then if you have a spacer, it shows up as that word there. Different things. So basically, this just lets you see what how your stuff is laid out. And then related, here is the related entities as show up on the related menu. So this is pretty much it. So again, just a textual representation. It doesn't get into a ginormous amount of detail, but enough to where you can figure out where you have stuff. So it was just a way of being able to document what was on my form, so that I could kind of go through it physically with my eye to figure out if I had stuff in there that I didn't need or things like that. So if I go back to customizations and go to view detail is fairly similar. So let's look at for the account. So what I did here for the view detail is so I'm going to kind of back up for a second. Sorry. With forms, since there was so much data, I put each form into an individual document. Okay. With the views here, I put everything in one document. Now that may not have been a good thing to do. I may break that out depending, because like I said, here's a 27-page document, for instance. So let's look at our main active customers, active accounts view. So if I jump down there to that, all this is a visual representation or textual representation of the view itself. So the view is active because you can deactivate views. Here are the display columns and their width in pixels. Here is the filter criteria. Here is the sorted by, and here are any linked entities. And then finally, here is the fetch XML query that is actually being executed to populate this view. And again, active customers, and I denote if it's a system view or not. I think at one point, the reason I did that is because I was thinking about putting in personal views, which I have not added to the system yet, so I'm still kind of debating that. But all this is just kind of a textual representation. So all I do is I pull out all of the view information and I decode it and decipher it, and then put it into a format that you can figure out. So it's just another way of documenting stuff so you can understand what's actually happening. So let's go back, and we got one more, which is business rules. Now, what I'm doing with business rules here is I'm actually displaying the JavaScript. So if you didn't know, when you create a business rule, it actually creates JavaScript that's executed behind the scenes. And what I do with that is I just export it out. Now, it's just in a .js file, and I'm just going to open it up with Notepad++. It's the easiest one since it knows what it is. And I need to do a video on this, but I have a plugin, or a couple plugins, and one is called JS Tool, and I'm going to format this. And the reason that I'm exporting out the JavaScript and not anything else is because Dynamics doesn't, at this point in time, save the textual description of the business rule that you see within the editor. If they did, I would only export that, but since they don't do that, I can't. This is the closest we can get. Okay, so what this business rule does is set the value of something, and really what you're looking at here is they're taking the account number and the account name, and I think they're adding them together is what they're doing, something like that. So basically, this is the JavaScript that is written behind the scenes whenever you create something, and then that's what it actually loads and executes. Okay, so whenever you see something like this, if you're not a JavaScript person, this probably will not help you at all. Like I said, I wish I could pull out the textual representation of the business rule, but they don't store that. So I would literally have to decode this JavaScript, and that's just not worth the effort at this point in time, unfortunately. So anyway, so what you will find is you will find one of these for each one. I'll go load another one here, see if it's any better. No, still just one. Yeah, so what this one is doing is it's setting a field visible or not visible depending on a value. So set field BR, field 7, okay. Yeah, so what this is doing is showing or hiding a field depending on the value of 1. So anyway, so again, first pass at it, if they ever add data to where they have the textual representation in there, then I'll export that as well so that we can see that. But at the top, you get the name of the thing, the description, and if it's activated or deactivated, so you know. And then that is pretty much it. So, yep, I think that's it. So, again, metadata, user interface, processes, sitemap, and then detail on business rules, forms, and views. That's it. Good luck.